Hi, welcome back into the sanctuary here at First Presbyterian Church. We're starting today with a shot of one of the particular stained glass that's in our church. This one, I don't know how well you can see it, but it is of Jesus when the children came to Jesus and he began to bless them. And you can reach there, or if you can see there, Jesus reaching out his hand to touch one of the children as he's meeting with them. That's the topic that I want us to think about today, this topic of touch, this idea of being touched and touching others. You know, in this time of social distancing, I'm becoming very aware of the importance and the fact that we're missing this element of touch within our culture. I think it's interesting to see the more we distance ourselves from others, the more I begin to see people struggling with this. I find that for myself, when I see somebody, there's this instant need that I have to almost reach out my hand right away and just want to shake hands with them. And I got to pull back on that, or pat them on the shoulder, or perhaps give them a gentle touch on the side or something like that, just to let them know that I see them there or something. And it's odd how I miss that, or I'm having to pull myself back from that. I also wonder sometimes, why do I keep touching my face? I don't know if anybody else has had this experience, but I've realized I've become very conscious of the fact that I'm constantly touching my face. Now, I'm going to try not to do this during the video, but I bet you're going to sit there and count how many times I do that. It's just this part of who we are. It's something about, as kids, we even wanted to touch everything or feel everything that's there. And what I think is happening in us is that we're beginning to find ourselves becoming touch hungry. Actually hungry for touch in our daily experience. It kind of made me think about, though, how there are some folks in our culture that perhaps this is a little more normal to them than it is for us. I mean, you think about those who have some kind of real difficult illness. I know folks who maybe struggle with cancer or some other kind of disease. They talk about how people are so hesitant to touch them even when it wouldn't matter. And then I think about persons who are struggling with homelessness. I wonder how often someone who is homeless is touched, at least in a good way. Or what about our more mature friends? You know, I remember reading one time that our senior adults are really touch-starved, that they don't receive the kind of touch that they would like or that they used to. In fact, the only kind of real touch they get is from a doctor or a caregiver and not from someone just wanting to say hello. And so I'm finding this thing that's going on in our culture. We are becoming hungry for touch. Now, of course, we have to acknowledge the fact that not everybody likes to be touched, and there's some people that really need that social boundary. And I know that for some, they've received some bad touch, some inappropriate or even abusive touch, and I'm not talking about that because that is always wrong. I'm talking about the kind of loving, compassionate touch that now we're not able to practice because we need to be distant from each other. It actually got me thinking about a passage of Scripture that it's really one of my favorite passages, I think because of the tender way I see Jesus interacting with this woman who was suffering from an illness. The story is in all the different Gospels, but Mark seems to tell it in a really unique and different way, and I'm really drawn to the way in which Mark tells this story more than the other Gospels. It seems what is happening is Jesus has been approached by a leader of the synagogue, one of the elders of the synagogue, and he has a daughter who is sick, and so Jesus is coming to take care of her, to heal her. And on the way, there's this great crowd that's gathering around Jesus, and this is what happens, beginning in Mark chapter 5, the very end of verse 24. This large crowd is following Jesus, and it's pressing in on him. And a woman was there who had been the subject of bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all that she had. Yet instead of getting any better, she was growing worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I will be healed. So that's what she does. She reaches out and touches him. The Bible says as soon as she does that, immediately the bleeding stopped, and she felt her whole body being freed of the suffering. Finally she was feeling that relief that she wanted to. And it came from a touch. It came from her reaching out and touching Jesus. But what happens next for her has got to be frightening, because what happens next is that once, after she had touched Jesus and after she experienced his healing, we are told that Jesus realized that power had gone out of him. Power had come out of Jesus because of this woman's touch. And he turned around in the crowd and he asked, "Who touched my clothes?" I'm not really sure how that sounded to the woman. But later on we're going to find out that it really caused some great concern for her. When Jesus said this, though, his disciples said to him, "You see this crowd against you, and yet you ask who touched me." But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. And then she was caught. She knew she was caught. So the woman, we're told, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at the feet of Jesus, trembling with fear. I wanted to pause there, trembling with fear. Why was she so afraid? Well, she was afraid because what she had done was she had broken the law, the religious law. Because she was like a person suffering from leprosy. You see, when someone suffered from leprosy in that culture, there was this fear that if you touched that person, you would be made unclean too. And so a person with leprosy had to shout as they were walking through a crowd, "Unclean, unclean," so that you would get out of the way, because they knew if they touched you or even bumped into you, then they too would be unclean. And because of what this woman ailed from, she too would have been considered unclean. So she had broken the law. She had reached out, she had touched Jesus, and now she knew she was caught. So she comes to Jesus, and she falls down before him in fear. But then it says, she told him the whole truth. The whole truth. Maybe she told him about how long it had been since she had been suffering from this. Maybe she told him about the isolation that she was feeling because she was now unclean. Maybe she told him about the friends that she had lost, the way in which she had to be away from everybody. Maybe she told him about all that she had spent and everything that she had tried. Maybe she told him that she felt as if she was no longer a person. She had just become her illness. And she told him the whole story, afraid, because she still didn't know what he was going to do. But what we're told is Jesus looked at her and he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." When Jesus says this, he doesn't say, "Be free from your illness." He says, "Be free from your suffering. Be free from all of your suffering. Be free from your isolation. Be free from your illness. Be free from you needing to yell, 'Unclean.' Be freed up from all those things that were holding you back. And now go and live as a son and a daughter." That's what Jesus gives us. For her, it's go and live as a daughter, made new relationships, new beginnings. And it all came from a touch. The thing is, I know that we can't touch right now. We can't. And don't get me started on whether or not this shows that we don't have faith, that we should just have the faith of Jesus because Jesus wasn't afraid to touch. That's not what the story is about. What I'm find myself thinking about is something that I kind of said in that last video I did when I talked about bread. I begin to wonder is, can I now begin to appreciate and see this need that we have of touch even more now than I did before? You see, I took touch for granted. I never even really paid attention that much to the ministry of touch and the importance of touch. But now when I can't do it, maybe I'm beginning to identify with those who are touch hungry all the time. All the time. Like this woman. How long had it been since she could touch someone without judgment? Right now, we are in the season of Lent, a season where we are invited to give something up, to fast from something. And people use all kinds of crazy things that they give up during this season of Lent. But you know what we're giving up right now? Maybe not by our own choice, but we're giving up the ability to reach out and touch people. When all this is over, I wonder, might we be changed, and might we be more sensitive and understanding to the power that we have with simply giving someone a loving touch? Think about the lack of touch right now for you. Think about what it means for you. And when you're able to touch again, think about how important it has been. For God has given us the gift of one another. And if you look at this stained glass once again and see that picture of Jesus, realize he was doing something that he didn't have to do. In fact, he was encouraged not to do. He was encouraged by his disciples to send those children away, but Jesus would have none of that. He knew the importance of blessing them and ministering to them. And as Jesus did over and over again with all kinds of people, he did it through the ministry of touch. He touched those who were sick. He touched those who were lonely. He touched those who needed to know that everything was okay. He even touched those who were dead to bring them back to life. Because there is power in his touch. And he has given us power in our touch as well. So thanks again for listening. Share this video if you would like, but most important, continue to seek God in all that you do. We may not be able to be back in here every day, but when we do, we hope that you'll join us and enjoy this place of sanctuary. So God bless.